And we have finally arrived to the last successful session of this really great, eventful day with the blessings
Mm.
of God and the hard work of numerous staff from the English department and the inevitable support of Cape Comorin Trust. I
Yes,
thank
yes.
them. And since we are here to the last session,
Mm,
without further ado, I would like
mm,
to welcome Dr. Shruti Mehta
mm.
from the Center of Language from the most prestigious North Cap University, Gurgaon, Haryana. Dr. Shruti Mehta, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bose. Thank you for calling me on. Yes, we've reached the fag end of the day, and I've had the pleasure of listening to some wonderful presentations. I've been logged in for quite a while since morning. I would really like to congratulate the Department of English, Muhammad Sata College of Arts and Science, and also the Cape Comorin Trust for organizing such a wonderful conference. The pleasure is entirely ours. We get to listen to such wonderful presentations by speakers from all across the world. So, without much ado, as you just said, we'd like to begin the proceedings of this session. So, I'd like to invite the first speaker of this session, Mr. Atiur Rahman, who's a PhD scholar from Assam University, Silchar,
Yes,
and
sir.
he's going to speak on the contribution of Abdul Hamid Jadwa Al Sahar to
To
the
the
development
Sahar,
of, I'm sorry,
Arabic language and literature.
yeah, to the development of Arabic language and literature. So, over to you,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman. It'll be great listening to you.
Good evening, everyone, professors, scholars, and all participants of the conference. Today, in this auspicious online program, I am going to present my topic on contributions of Abdul Hamid Jauda Sahar. I am going to present my topic. Headlines: Life sketch of Abdul Hamid Jauda Sahar, relationship between and language and literature, and source of Islamic doctrine and social views, humanity, fundamental practices and institute of Islam, Islamic thought, the social systems of morality in Islam, equality, forbearance and forgiveness, women in Islam. Some of his famous works are development of the Arabic language and calculation. I am going to present my topic. Abdul Hamid Jawda As-Sahar was born April 25th, 1930 in Cairo in a middle-class family of Palestine origin. I am audible, sir, ma'am.
Yes, you are.
Ma'am,
Please
I
carry
am.
on. Yeah, yeah, you are.
This family migrated to Egypt to end 19th century. Most of them worked and commerce adherence to the teaching of Islam, following the origin Arab traditions. It was a joint family. All members of family played a proud impact on the growth and development of Sahar. Abdul Hamid Joda Sahar started his primary education in the school of Sulamia Aswais, and they joined the elementary schools Gulamia. The author hated his study most because he believed in the ideas that death is the end of life, and therefore he does not extend himself and with education. His school was situated in the way of cemetery where the funeral were passed by every day in front of his school. So he was there to escape for the tournament school and teachers. Learn on the principle that the day is not controlled by any creation to change his interpretations of life. Afterward, the author got admitted the secondary education in Ford Al Awal, Aswais. After completing the secondary education, he joined the Faculty of Commerce, which he completed his final education 1937. As Sahar grew up the high cultural atmosphere from his childhood. He used listen to most energy with his father. His companion read Association of Salam Ali, and the origin by his father is very his Friday evening. He read in this association various books such as Asira al-Nabawiya by Ibn Hisham, Kutu as-Salam by Waqidi al-Ayyam, Taha Hussein, After passing out from university, he meet his colleagues like Najib Mahfouz, Adil Kamil, and his morning of every Friday. There was a literary and intellectual discussion among which left great impact formation of his culture. Sahar's literature vary aspects following diversity of his culture. He has authored a good number of books and various themes like society, religious cultures, etc. Apart from producing short stories, novel, and drama, he was written many scholarly articles and different socio-religious issues. Abdul Hamid Jawad Sahar became one of the most popular authors in the field of modern Arabic literature and also one of the most successful Egyptian writers in the world. He finally believed in the need creation just society where everyone can enjoy freedom and respect according to him. Islamic teaching can offer sure panacea and all human ills and evil. Relationship between religion and literature. The literature between religion and literature could not be aligned within a period of time. No theories can exactly prove which these two were born or is birth in different eras. But it proved religion is the religion in which human being bearer ultimate being and literature is the religion in which humanity bearer religion. All an ancient language of the world like Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, Sanskrit use a tools represent the religion like chemistry, Islamism, and Hinduism. In the early writing from author, those language is mostly about religious and does not mean the author have nothing to write apart from religion. They somewhat believe that the art of that the art or rather can expose the phenomenal when they communicated about divine source. Many theories can put up proof they are founded by the same force. Since they are both mistake constants apple of life, whenever the mind of humanity in need of in the rest of the state discretion, only two limits could provide source of remedy. Source of Islamic doctrine and social views. Islamic doctrine, laws, and thinking generally based upon four sources or fundamental principles: the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma, and Ijtihad. The Quran regard as the bhag or speech of God delivered to Muhammad by the angel Jibril, divine into 100 on 14 surahs of equal length. It is the fundamental source of Islamic teaching, the source relevant to Makkah during the earliest part of Muhammad's career on concerned mostly with ethical or spiritual teaching and the day of judgment. The surahs relevant to at Medina at a later period of career in the Prophet and concerned for the most part of social linguism and the political moral principles of constituting of ordering the community. Sunnah was used by pre-Islamic Arabs denote their tribal of or common law. In Islam is came a mean of example of the Prophet. He word his word and did and recorded and complement laws of Hadith. Hadith provide the written documentation of the Prophet words and did six of these collections complete the third century. Came to regarded especially authorized by the largest group in Islam, the Sunnah, and also large group Sunnah has its own hadith continues for political collections. The doctrine of ijma or consensus, the introduced in the second century In the second century, in the order of standardized legal theory or practices in overcome individual and religional difference of opinion. Thought converse as consensus of scholar, ijma was a actual practice of more fundamental operating factors from the third century. Ijma has among of to a principal suitability of things to points on which consensus was reached in practice were considered closed in further substance questions of them provided accepted international of the Quran and the actual content of the Sunnah. Humanity. According to the Quran, God created two opportunity parallel species and creatures, human being and jinn. The one from clay and the other from fire. About the jinn, however, the Quran says little, although it implies that the jinn are innocent which reason and responsibility but are more prone to evil than human beings are. It is which humanity that the Quran which describes itself a guide for the human race and century recorded the story of the fall of Adam promoted in Judaism and Christianity is accepted, but the Quran states that God forgave Adam his act and disobedience, which is not viewed in the Quran original or seen in the Christian sense of the term. In the story of the creation, humanity, Iblis or Shaitan, who prostrate to God against the creation of human being because they were so myself of are lost in the competition of knowledge against Adam. The Quran therefore declared humanity to be the noblest of all creation. The creation whose bore the trust that the rest of creation refused to accept. The Quran thus recite that all nature has been made substance humans who are God present on earth. Nothing in all creation has been made without proposed humanity itself. It has not been creation in sport and but rather has been created which the purpose of serving and obeying God's will. Fundamental practices and institution of Islam. The five pillars doctrine the earliest decided after the death of the Prophet, certain beside future of the religious social organization of Islam were signed out serve as a anchoring point of the community. Life formulated the pillars of Islam to those five, the Kharij step at six pillars. The is jihad, which, however, is not accepted by the general community. The Shahada or profession of faith, the first pillar of the profession of faith, there is no deity but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God upon which depends membership and the community. The professions of faith must be recite at last which one of the left allowed currency and proposedly which as understanding the meaning and which ascent for the heart from his fundamental belief and diverse beliefs angel and the relevant books and series of prophets and last day of the judgment. Prayer, the second pillar consists of five daily economical prayer. These are prayer many they offered individually each on the unable to go the most. The first prayer performed before sunrise, the second just after noon, the third late afternoon, the fourth immediately after sunset, and the fifth before the rising to bed. And zakah, the third pillar of the obligatory tax, collect zakah. This is the only permanent tax levied by the Quran and payable annually on the food, grains, cattle, and cash. After 1 year passing, the amount varies of different categories. Thus, one grant and foods and 10% of land worted by rain, 5% of land worted artificially on cash and precious metal 2.5% zakat collectible by the state and to be used primarily for the poor, but the Quran mention other purpose ransoming Muslims war, captive reading, toys, debates, paying tax collector fees, jihad. After the breakup the Muslim religion, political power, payment of zakat become a matter of voluntary charity depended of individual conscience in the modern Islam world. It has been left by the individual, except some countries where the share strictly maintained. Fasting during the month of Ramadan and laid down the Quran in the fourth pillar of faith, fasting being uh, daybreak and end of sunset. And the Hajj, the fifth pillar, is the annual pilgrimage Hajj Makkah, prescribed to every Muslim on in the lifetime, provided one can afterward it, and provided a person has enough and provisions to leave his family and his absence. Especially service is held in the sacred mosque on the seventh of month of Zulhijjah. Pilgrimage activities being by the eighth and concluded on the 12th or 13th. All worships entered the state of Ihram. They were to seamless and garments and avoid sexually intercourse. The cutting of hair and nail and certain other activities pilgrimage from outside Makkah assume ihram and specific pointed or road to the within the mosque. Islamic thought, Islamic technology is philosophy are two traditions of learning development by the Muslim thinker who were engaged on one hand in the and in the ration or clarification and defense of the principles of the Islam religion on other. In the portion of ancient science, these thinkers two positions that was intermediate between the traditionalists who remain attach the latter exposed of the primary source of Islamic doctrine, if the doctrine Islamic spiritual, spiritual and the Hadith, saying traditional and the Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him, and who authored design and those who design led them uh, in the Islamic community. Although the status of believer and Islamic remain practices, judicial questions not matter the philosopher decided, except in regard to the fundamental questions of extension of God, Islamic relevant and future rewards, and of Islamic were demanding to make it almost impossible to make a valid declaration of this sort about professions Muslim in the course of event Islamic history. Representative converting rules to their course made Those rules declared in a four of their movements and even them to precious their opponent. Thus there arose the some locality and riots are semblance of an official and orthodox doctrine, the social system and morality of Islam.
Mr.
And,
Rahman, Mr. Rahman,
and
considering the time
ma'am,
constraint, may I request you to wind up with your presentation, please? If you could come to the concluding
yeah, ma'am, yeah,
aspect.
ma'am. For forbearance and forgiveness, the Muslim, according to what does he, what to pay, fall, and according which not only later but also spirit a law. However, even though Islamic imposed a number of riding and appearing and inflexible, and women and Islam as in most of the normative type of the ancient world, women were did unimportant in pre-Islamic Arabic indeed a society, save the save the rise of desert life women were regarded to the margin of community of life. The advantage of Islam fundamentally altered the status of women in several ways. First and most importantly, in overturned traditions, according women equal status before Allah, no longer whether women designed human face. And I concluded my and some
All
of
right.
his famous work are around Abdul Hamid Jawda Sahar wrote 63 66 books. The modern the culture Arabic culture and in literature. He developed to the development modern Arabic. Uh, he wrote 66 books around 66. I concluded the from the Abdul Hamid Jawda Sahar 1930 and 1974 is picturing the socio-religious and think masterpiece book Abdul al-Dastur min min al-Quran al Ahadith. The book is the light on Quran and Hadith. The author contains his socio-religious aspects in the book, and he describes some social and religious rules like religious freedom and constitution, the republican unity of nation, unity of humanity, opinion, freedom, women rights, security, and research, contract, and cooperate line, etc. I concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman. Thank you for presenting your ideas before us. And if there is any question from the audience, you're most welcome to pose a question to Mr. Rahman. No questions. All right. Thank you, Mr. Rahman. It will be quite interesting to read the works of Mr. Abdul Hamid Jada, as pointed by you. I would definitely like to know more about his contribution in Arabic language and literature uh, beyond what you've shared with us today. Thank you so much. The next speaker for
Thank you.
today is Dr. PM Abdul Sakir, and he's an assistant professor and head postgraduate department of English, Amal College of Advanced Studies, Kerala. Dr. PM Zakir, I would
Good
request you to
evening,
speak
ma'am.
on your topic and let
Excuse me,
let
ma'am.
us. Yeah,
May I be permitted to say something?
yeah, please, sir, please go ahead.
Ma'am, with all due respects, as you said, we are thoroughly enjoying the presentation of all these good people here. But with the time constraint, I humbly request. Of course, let me make sure that I cannot forgive myself for curbing your enthusiasm. But however, considering the time, I request all the participants to consider limiting your presentation to I can't lay some.
Very difficult.
Of course, it's very difficult. I am unable to forgive myself for saying this, but I hope everyone understands. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So please go
Right,
ahead. Your
thank
topic
you.
is narrative and selfhood, the experience of Oloda
Yeah.
Equian. Thank you so
Good
much.
evening, ma'am. Thank you, sir. My name is Dr. Abdul Sakir. My topic is titled as Narrative and Selfhood, the Experience of Alauda Ikena. Here in this paper, I would like to speak about the role of writing, the act of writing, the role it has played in the liberation, the emancipation of the slaves, the Afro-American slaves. Actually, writing was really not a simple act, but it was really it was fulfilling many functions in the case of these slaves in America, Afro-American slaves. They were the victims of racism. They have been victimized at the level of their bodies, and they had attained some kind of a consciousness to narrate their painful and traumatic life as a strategy to challenge the hegemonic structure of the society, and ultimately for bringing liberation, freedom, and liberation. And it was really something. So they were really. It's not only in the case of these slaves, all the people who are oppressed, who are harassed, marginalized sections of the society have been writing of their personal experiences or autobiographical experiences that they had, and they have been writing their life narratives, and they were really using their past to rehabilitate themselves properly in the present. So in that sense, we can say that in the case of these Afro-American slaves, they were really using writing as a political, or writing can be taken as a political act. In the case of this paper, it was really helping them to recognize the different socio-political and cultural forces that acted upon their individual self, and the factors concocted together to oppress and harass the individual self and keeping them marginalized. And slave narratives are really both so it's really a record of understanding the self, and also a record of understanding the complex social system that has been oppressing them. And it was really something like, so in one way, in another way, we can say that they had a very fragmented sense of the self, and writing was also an act of making some kind of a coherence, and they were really making some kind of a coherence and consistency to another voice fragmented sense of the self. And they were the victims of racism, and the deliberate construction of a new mode of narration significant. This is really what they have been doing in the writing. They were really deliberately doing the act of writing in order to make some kind of a construction of a new mode of narration and signification. The Foucauldian terminology of the technology of the self, that's really what I have used in this presentation. And writing, as far as these slaves were concerned, it was really used. It was a technology of the self that they had used, and I would like to speak on that later. Questions of nationalistic discourses were integration and homogeneity and other exclusivities. So they were really contesting the idea of nationalism and all the homogeneous ideas, elite concept of nationalism, nationhood. Everything has been contested by these writers. Nation was really a contested space, and they were really making some kind of a carnivalesque space. And because these people, slaves, were really living in the fringe spaces of the society. They were the marginalized lot, and they were really speaking truth to power. In the case, as in the case of the Indian Dalits, they were really speaking truth to power through their writing, or through the bold act of writing about their lives, experiences, and the pains and sufferings undergone by these people. That's why these narratives are really called as narratives of pain, because these slave narratives are really marked with the uninterrupted and stable narrative of pain and the suffering undergone by the colored people in a society which was polarized by racism. And another thing, this is called narratives of these Indian Dalit writers' autobiographies are also called as narratives of, because this uninterrupted and stable narrative of pain, that is one aspect of that. Another aspect is that authenticity of experience. That is really another aspect of the writings or these narratives. They were really writing of their experiences, truthful, candid, bold narrative of the experiences that they had really undergone in their lives. That's another feature of the slave narrative. The pattern of these narratives is really something very significant. We know that it was really moving. It had a linear movement. So in the first part, there wasn't any such clear separation like that. But in the first part of this narrative, we can see that they were really speaking of their lives, painful and oppressive experiences. And in the second part, or in the second phase of the narrative, we can see that they were really moving on from these lives, painful experiences, to an active phase of intervention in which they were really actively, they were writing about their active interventions, social interventions, or the technologies of the self that they had adopted, the Foucauldian technologies of the self that they had adopted in order to make some kind of an agency, or in order to find visibility, social visibility, in order to get social visibility, in order to get agency, and also in order to make some kind of a redefining of their subject position in the society. They were really taking control upon their own selves, and the body was really the prime. So almost all these slaves were really put to hard physical labor, hard physical punishments. They were really the victims of their own bodies. Body was a prime concern for them, and they were really, so the body, so it was really, body was a prime concern for them, and the narrative is really full of the painful and oppressive experiences that were really meted out to them at the level of their bodies. They were really speaking of their own bodies, they were speaking of the social body also, and they were really trying to make an understanding or comprehension of the larger social structures in which they were really oppressed and harassed. So the writing was really something like that. The body was really something like a contested space, and the sense of the self was really mediated through the physical and material realities, primarily related with the survival. So survival was really something that the basic issues or basic necessities of the life are really something that was at risk, and they were really not adequately provided. And in the context of Indian Dalit autobiographies, Sharmila Regge has used the term testimonials, an individual's retrieval of traumatic memories. And that's really what these self-narratives and slave narratives are really doing. And they're also doing some kind of a therapeutic function, because an individual is really retrieving his memories in order to make himself better placed in the present, and also to build a better future. So past has been used for that purpose, and in that sense, we can say that writing was also acting so it was really performing some kind of a therapeutic function. Slave narratives are a record of this growth of the individual authors and the representative communities in the respective sociopolitical. So the growth of an individual and the growth of the society that they were really belonging to, that has been recorded and documented in the individual narratives. The paper is really focusing on this. So my paper is really focusing on the second phase of the narrative. The individuals are really actively intervening in the, or making active interventions in the society, and they are really doing some kind of, or taking some kind of a control upon this. They make some kind of, upon their self, make a manipulation of their self in order to get agency, power, in order to make a redefinition of their subject position in the society. And this is really what I'm really focusing on in my narrative, in my presentation. Although the Ikenus narrative has been taken for that year, this technology of the self is a term coined by Foucault, and Foucault has been examining all the Hellenic and Roman texts, and he has been coming out with this idea of technology of the self. Foucault has been examining how the individuals and societies are really structured and organized in the West. But in the third volume of History of Sexuality, Foucault was speaking about the idea of power and self, and individuals are really not completely subjected to power, but we can have some kind of a control, or we can make some kind of a we get freedom and liberation by making some kind of by taking care of the self, by manipulating the self. And this is really what Foucault has been speaking about in the third volume of Sexuality. We are not completely subjected to power, but we can have some kind of an active role or agency we can achieve by taking care of the self. And these practices of Foucault pointed that these practices of the self are intended for the common objective of the conversion of the self. Actually, these practices of the self, care of the self, technologies of the self are really for the objective of converting the self. And this is really what these the slave authors of slave narratives have done. They were really practicing, they were really just trying to practice various technologies of the self, art of the self. They were taking care of the self in order to convert it, and they have successfully done that. And these slave narratives are really a record of the success story of individual authors. The life of these authors were really moving from a very passive state of suffering to an active state of social intervention and gaining agency. And knowing the self was really this is really what Foucault has been trying to focus on, his idea of care of the self in the third volume of History of Sexuality, and that is really subtitled as Care of the Self. And Danaher et al. Defines Foucault's technologies of the self as a series of techniques that allow individuals to work on themselves by regulating their bodies, their thoughts, and their conduct. And Foucault himself has defined it as technologies of the self are really ways of attempting to live the truth, tell the truth, and be changed by the truth. One important technology of the self that was really care of the self, or technology of the self, that was employed by all these writers of slave narratives, authors of slave narratives had their own technologies of the self, practices of the self that they have successfully employed, and that's how they were really able to gain ultimate freedom or emancipation. The text that I have used here is Olaudah Ikenus or Gustavo the African. It was the slave narrative authored by Olaudah Ikena, or he was also known as Gustavus Vasa, lived between 1745 and 1797. Olaudah Ikena, in his narrative, poignantly depicts about the humility. In the first part of the narrative, he is speaking about the poignant experiences that he had, the sufferings that he had undergone as a slave. But when he moves on to the second part of the narrative, we can see that he is speaking about how he was really able to come out of the clutches of slavery, how he was able to buy the ultimate freedom, liberation. And he has been employing various technologies of the self. And some of the technologies of the self that he has employed in order to gain freedom, emancipation, liberation were this: learning martial skills and games. That was really the first. He has been learning martial skills, games as a young boy. He has been learning it with the intention of that was helping him later in order to get some kind of a that helped him to get liberation. And the quality of telling truth, another quality that he had practiced throughout his life. Though he had suffered a lot as a slave, he was sticking on to this habit of telling the truth. And later he has been baptized into a Christian, and that was really a mark, an indication that he was really converting into a very devoted Christian. Then Ikena's baptism has to be seen as a significant event that happened in his life. He became a very devoted Christian. His belief in God, that was really something very deep. The mind, it was always alert with. So another Ikena writes that I had a mind on which everything uncommon and everything which I considered marvelous made their full impression. This mind, which was always alert and with full of hopeful and positive thoughts. Another practice that he had was he was always positive. He was very hopeful about future. He was always alert, and that helped him to navigate the shore of a new self through the flood of miserable and tormenting experiences. It can re-emphasizes throughout the narrative, especially in the second part of the narrative. In the latter part of the narrative, we can see that he re-emphasizes his firm belief in God at many instances in narrative. So he felt the providence of God saving him at such crucial junctures of crisis of his life. Similarly, personal qualities, as I mentioned, qualities like honesty and honor were groomed by him as his life's principles. He craved for winning his freedom only through honest means. He has been trying to buy his freedom, but that too by through honest means. And he was always trying to focus on, he was sticking on to that honesty throughout his life. And this honest means has been ultimately bringing his freedom. And the master had given him the promise of giving him the freedom as he could purchase it. Then when he attained the technical signature, he became very happy. That's what he's feeling when he got the ultimate sign of granting him freedom. I'd been a slave in the morning, trembling at the will of another, was become my own master and completely free. I thought that this was the happiest day I had ever experienced. In short, it can be summarized that Ikena was able to obtain his freedom from his master by his personal virtues. His personal virtues, he was very religious, and he was really practicing all the moral qualities, moral values, including moral and ethical values like honesty, telling truth, etc. And he built up a good friend. So he was able to build up, or he was able to cultivate good friendship with people. More than that, the quality of perseverance, that was another personal virtue that he had, and he was able to buy his freedom through that. And he had a heightened self-esteem. Though he was born as a slave, but he had some kind of a heightened self-esteem and sense of selfhood. This is a proof how good he was. A contact certificate, something like that, has been signed by one of his masters, and it shows that he was really very good, a very virtuous fellow, and has been practicing all these virtuous qualities that was helping him ultimately to buy his freedom. So these are really, I would like to conclude, Olaudah Ikena was able to practice all these virtuous qualities, which can be called as technologies, Foucauldian technologies of the self, that has helped him to convert his self and ultimately bringing his freedom and emancipation. That's how he was really able to get out of the slavery, the clutches of slavery or bondage. And we can say that practicing these are really, I would like to sum up, practicing the ethical and moral values like truth, sincerity, and honesty, immense faith in God, how he was able to cultivate friendship with people, passion for learning and reading, and these were some of the qualities that he had, and he was able to buy freedom, and he was able to ultimately able to gain agency, emancipation, liberation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sakir. It was wonderful listening to you. Extremely well prepared paper in which you talked about how Iguano talks about his experiences, and in fact, he was he was one of the first few who wrote about
Yeah,
raised their voices and talked about how their lives were oppressed and how they were undergoing pain. So beautifully written, and I really appreciate the manner in which you compared what the slaves felt, and also what Dalits back home
yeah.
experienced. So that was a wonderful comparison. And I hope you've also read Hammond Britton, another slave voice.
Yeah,
So you know,
I've read another slave narrative, Frederick Douglass.
yes.
Yeah, Frederick Douglass. Then Harriet Jacobs. Yeah, they are
So all
some of,
these autobiographical narratives and all these memoirs actually
yeah,
bring a lot of tears to eyes, and we can also relate to what happened to some of our
yeah.
ancestors back.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. These narratives,
Wonderful listening to
yeah,
you,
these
Dr.
records are
Sakir.
really not mere autobiographies, but they have played an important role in the ultimate liberation of the respective
Absolutely,
people. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But, yeah, so
their
similar,
liberation
yeah,
and
comparison.
actually voices of and for the voiceless.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, speaking truth to power, something like that. You can see that
Yes,
the narratives were really something, something. So it was really it has played an important role. So in the case of all these oppressed, marginalized sections of the society, we can see that writing was really a tool
very,
and
very
a
important.
device.
Played a major role. Yes,
Yeah. Thank you very
absolutely.
much for all these nice,
Yes.
encouraging comments, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr.
Thank you.
Satir. Wonderful
Thank you.
listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we now move on to our next presenter, and I would like to call upon Miss Maria Juliet Rani and Dr. Benson Tilagar Christados. Pardon me if I'm pronouncing incorrectly. Both are from St. John's College and would present a paper on a comparative gender analysis in Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's "We Should All Be Feminists." Miss Maria, are you there?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah. Good evening. Please
Okay, ma'am.
carry on.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. Thank you. So, good evening to all. So, I am Maria Juliet Rani. I'm doing my research in St. John's College, Palayamkotte, Tirunelveli, and my title of my the paper is a comparative gender analysis in Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's "We Should All Be Feminist." So, Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi is a Nigerian novelist and a non-fiction writer. Actually, she has written well-known novels such as Purple Hibiscus, Off of a Yellow Sun, The Thing Around Your Neck, etc. And more than that, she wrote a few non-fictions such as We Should All Be Feminist, Dear Ejelo. So, We Should All Be Feminist is an essay in which she shares personal encounters in her life. And more than that, actually, being a black woman, she encounters lot of gender issues in lot of gender issues and the racial difficulties in her life. Sometimes she feels inferiority about her complexion because she is a black, yet she stabilizes her identity as a black woman in the world. Actually, she is a contemporary writer. So this essay, We Should All Be Feminist, it has actually 9 plots. Each plot has the effective incident that has been experienced by Chimamanda Adichie in her life. And the first plot is when she publishes her first novel, Purple Hibiscus. Actually, this novel, it includes the idea of feminism. So one day, an academic Nigerian woman, comes and says to Adichie that feminism was not their culture. that feminism was an un-African. So on hearing this, Adichie gets shocked by women's view about her novel, because she was an academic one who was educated well, but she says that she insists that feminism was not their culture, that feminism was an un-African. So she gets shocked of this, and she later understands that through the she, even the educated woman, is also possessed with these conservative thoughts of the Nigerian culture. It is not only happening in the Nigerian, it is occurring still in every corner, nook and corner in the world. And the second incident is that was actually happened in her childhood. When she is at the age of 9, she is in primary school in Suka. Actually, Suka, that is situated in a southeastern town in Nigeria. So one day her teacher announces in the class that whoever gets the highest score in the test, they will become the class observer. Actually, monitoring the class is a big deal to every students. I think we might have experienced this kind of a feeling. So Adichie is also the same thing. She is very much interested in this act, and she wants to become a class topper, and finally she succeeds with this also. But her teacher, she unexpectedly says that the class leader has to be a boy rather than a girl. So the teacher, and more than that, the teacher forgets to say this earlier. So Adichie is enormously, actually she is saddened about this incident. And but the irony is, the second rank holder, the boy himself, is not at all fascinated or attracted to become a class monitor. So through this, Adichie insists that even the teacher herself is also too obsessed with the cultural system that the boy must be the monitor, must be monitor the class, or the he must be the head at any situation. So and then Adichie, more than that, Adichie strongly believes men and women are different. And because both men and women have different hormones and different types of biological changes. Men are physically stronger than women. So everyone believes in a society that men can rule the world more than the woman could. However, the supremacy and the respect are occupied by only men. So though men and women possess the same job and equal qualification in nowadays, men are paid more than women. So but in somewhere, in some places, men have the high esteem on women for their intellectual and their innovative skills also. So Adichie welcomes this kind of a progressive among men. And then she shares another important incident, that one day she goes to the one of the best hotels in Nigeria for a stay, but she is stopped by the guard at the entrance. He asks for actually her details and the room number of the person whom she visits. But Adichie gets furious about their inhospitality, and later she realizes the unthinking assumptions of the god, that if any Nigerian woman visits and looks for the room in hotel, they must be a sex worker. Because they assume that the Nigerian women who have no money for paying in the hotel. But they strongly believe that the arrival of man or any man in the hotel is something legitimate. So through this, she feels sad about these kind of stereotypical stupidity. And Adichie again insists about one story. She has a friend in America who is looking for a job, and one day she sees a vacancy in a high paying job, because she worked in many places and she has a good experience as well. So she goes there, and she applies and she successfully gets the job in US. So one day she joins in the meeting for the discussion. So whenever she wants to, Adichi is a friend, whenever she wants to deliver her ideas in a meeting, her boss, he interrupts and never lets her to expose the ideas. Instead, he encourages other male employees to discuss about the project and other things. So, as a woman, she couldn't tolerate these kind of things. So Adichi takes her as an example to discuss about these things. So she has experience through her friend, right? So she talks about this kind of an ill treatment because women are not getting equal position in this kind of a situation. So that she feels the plight of her friend who has never have any courage to disagree with the boss preconception also. So she dislikes Adichi dislikes this kind of biased nature of a boss who does not agreeing with a woman's high paying status. So Adichi insists that emphasizes that every woman has all the rights to express their ideas. If they are stopped by anyone, they should not resist the opportunity to ask their freedom of speech to anyone in the world. And more than that, Adichi, she often feels terrible about the primitive society where people teach girls not to be too ambitious, but they fail to teach the male children how to behave in the society, how to treat women in the society. They said you should be very submissive to your husband, and you should be very careful about whatever you are saying in the world. But they fail to teach everything to the male child. So that is why the lot of a problem is occurring. A lot of problems are occurring. And similarly, Adichi insists the same ideology that women should come out of their norms and customs to achieve their goals. And finally, she concludes that she claims the gender expectations and contempts these kind of the stupid stereotypical stupidity. And she concludes by saying that every woman, man and woman, both should understand the value of human being and its humanity rather than subjugating one another. And she respects both gender and expects everyone to value the human beings. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Juliet. A wonderful presentation. And Chimamanda Ngozi is my personal favorite, and I've spent a lot of time reading We Should All Be Feminists. And you rightly said that she advocates the voice of all women across the world, and of course highlights how the power dynamics of sex, economics, and even culture, Nigerian culture, as you rightly pointed out, uh, and it's not just specific to Nigerian culture. It is something which affects women all over the world. And of course how we must all change our attitude and our mindset and consider all men women equal, and not try marginalizing women. And this power imbalance should rightly be removed from the society.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
thank
Yes.
thank you so much, Ms.
Thank you,
Rani.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay,
Okay.
so we can now move on to our next speaker for today, Sajena A, who's a research scholar from Sri Ayappa College for Women. And the topic that is chosen for the presentation is the future of humanity, transhumanism in Paolo Bacigalupi's The Drowned Cities.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
The title of my research article is The Future of Humanity, Transhumanist Perspectives in Paulo Bacigalupi's The Drowned City. And the research paper honing on the role of arguments in the war-torn cities and their urge to survive in the world free from the clutches of their masters. And in addition to this, whether this transhumans or the future or the dark future of the humanity is it's left to the readers. And Paolo Bacigalupi, he's an exemplary writer of American literature who is widely known for his science fiction and fantasy novels. And he has been nominated for the Nebula Award for 3 times and Hugo Awards for 4 times. And he has won the Theodore Surgeon Memorial Award for his science fantasy novels. And the novel that is chosen for scrutinization includes The Drowned Cities. And the leading characters are Tool, Mahila, Mouse, and General Caro. And it is set in future Southeast America. And it has been devastated by the ravages of climate change and political conflict. And in addition to this, the arguments are also introduced by the corporates in order to fight in the war zone. Transhumanism. The term transhumanism was coined by the English biologist and philosopher Julian Huxley in 1957, and it is a belief that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. And transhumanism is an intermediate form between human and post-human. And these transhumans, they resemble human in most of the aspects, but they have more power and abilities beyond those of the standard humans. And the terms like unnatural, neophilia, and perfectionism are associated with the transhumanism. Unnatural. Actually, Mercier Corporation produces arguments to make the fight in the war zone, and they ordered General Caro to produce an argument which is entirely different from that of other arguments, which should be very hyper competent and it should be a fine specimen. So, as a result of this request, General Caro creates the tool, which is made by combining the DNA of hyena, dog, and human being, and similarly, Emiko, it's a female version and is designed by combining the DNA of dog and human. The former is meant to fight in the war zone, and the latter is to satisfy the needs of the human being as well as a person, as well as a personal companion. And the second term is neophilia. Neophilia means a love for novelty. And here, most of the arguments created by these Mercier corporations are they are free from disease and destruction. And a tool he is built with the blood full of superclotting agents, and his cells have the ability to replicate as quickly as a kudzu. And if a tool is hurt with any sharp instruments, it will close itself within a few minutes. And perfectionism. Perfectionism is here the tool is meant for the modern battlefield, and he is very hyper competent, and he's embedded with the violence, then stamina and fearlessness, and he's tolerant to poisons and chemical attacks also, and he's resistant to fire and cold and fear and pain, and he is totally a fine specimen. And General Caro says the blood of a dozen predators pumped in its vein, a DNA cocktail of killing, tiger and dog and hyena, a perfect creature designed from the blood up to hunt and war and kill. And his enormous strength is described by the prison goddess. These things never die. You never seen the monsters fight up north on the border. Dog faces are demon spawn. They don't die until the final flood. And these transhumans, they are better than human in most of the aspects. Like they have a problem solving approach and a pragmatic attitude. They are better than human in their strength, speed, accuracy, and they are free from disease and memory. And what are the negative traits of these transhumans are? Their rage and enormous strength. Actually, the tool from the drowned cities as well as the Emiko from the wind up girl, they both are genetically engineered human beings and they are meant to be mastered by their creator. But what happened means these transhumans they kill their own masters. For instance, this tool he slaughters his master and pulls the heart and consumes it. And Emiko, within a fraction of second, kills more than 10 men within a fraction of seconds. So this tool and Emiko can also be compared to the Frankenstein of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's monster. And towards the end of the Frankenstein says, "Devil begone, I will not hear you. There can be no community between you and me, and we are enemies." But here, the Paolo Bacigalupi has portrayed this transhumans in a entirely different light. That is, their desire is to save the humanity and like that. But what my perception is, these creators, these transhumans, they have slaughtered their own creation. So the argument like tool with high efficiency and strength, if they are unleashed among human beings, they may become a threat to the human community. And in addition to this, they also disrupt the entire bio-network. So it may become the dark future of the humanity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sajana. Very interesting. Science fiction is the upcoming genre, the latest, and quite interesting to know about how you've related to Frankenstein and how you've given us your conclusion that they are going to be self-destructive in future. quite interesting listening to you. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to call upon the next speaker, the last speaker for the day, Mr. Shafaq Muzaffar, who's a research scholar from the University of Kashmir. And the topic that he has chosen to present today is The Good American and the Bad American in select works of Khalid Husseini and Nadeem Aslam. May I request Mr. Muzaffar to please proceed?
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I am Shafaq Muzaffar.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah,
It's perfectly all right.
Yeah.
It's perfectly all right. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this two-day international conference. I thank the Department of English at Muhammad Saqib College of Arts and Science in Tamil Nadu. I also thank Cape Comorian Trust and publishers. I'm further thankful to the organizing committee and their participants. The topic of my presentation is Post-Truth, the Good American and the Bad American in select works of Khalid Husseini and Nadeem Aslam. Khalid Husseini and Nadeem Aslam are writers of international acclaim. Khalid Husseini has written 3 novels and a short story so far. All the 3 novels are themed around Afghanistan. Nadeem Aslam has written 6 novels, out of which only 2 are themed around Afghanistan. What emerges out of these Afghan-based novels is the stereotyping and otherization of an entire religion, region, and race. Also, what gets authentication out of these novels is the image of America as a Garden of Eden. In fact, for Husseini, it's Eden itself. More than representation in these novels, we find misrepresentation of Afghanistan. And alas, we fail to find counter-discourse against the first world's interpretations of the rest. Nevertheless, when one takes a deep dive into Khalid Husseini and Nadeem Aslam's novels, one finds that apart from the good Muslim and the bad Muslim discourse, we do have a good American and bad American counter-discourse, mushrooming out unconsciously out of these texts. Right from the time of Plato, absolute truth has been a touchstone. In fact, from Nietzsche to Derrida, who did not question and challenge the idea of absolute truth? From manufacturing consent to manufacturing dissent, there's always blurring of the facts. And it's the job of a researcher to look beyond the pervasive uncertainty and understand outlets of knowledge. It can be argued that the successive saga of Husseini's novels in the West is perhaps because of the misrepresentation of his homeland through the reinforcement of the conventional Orientalist structures. Husseini's novels are thus an attempt to expose the ideological construction of deformed histories of a region and its people. Particularly Husseini's novel, The Kite Runner. Rahim Khan, who is the friend of Amir's father, Amir the protagonist, he says to Amir while he's on a mission to rescue Sohrab, he says them there is an American couple. So this couple here are the typical examples of the good American. He says that there's a couple, Thomas and Betty Cladwell, who are running a charity organization for Afghan orphans. And it's with these couple, these American people, that Sohrab can have a better life. So he should go out and rescue them. Contrary to this, we have another couple in the novel Kite Runner that is running a grocery store in California. When Amir and his father Baba migrates to US, one day they're out to the grocery shop to buy some oranges, and Baba has not taken cash with him, so he gives the American grocery store couple whose name Mr. and Mrs. Nugent, he gives them a check, and they doubt him. They treat him as a sign of suspicion. They threaten him that he need to show his license, their ID cards, or else they're going to call the police. So what we see here that America here emerges out as a materialistic, valueless country because Baba had been their customer in the grocery store for more than 3 years. And on contrary, then we have Amir remembering Afghanistan, where he could take bread from the bread maker for whole month, and as proof, the bread maker would keep you. So we have this couple as a bad American in the novel. In Husseini's second novel, A Thousand Splendid Suns, we see that after the Twin Tower attack, the narrator quotes that there is Bush who's all in tears, he's crying. So the image of the Bush as someone who is sympathizing with his people, who feels the pain of his people, he emerges out to be a good American. But on the contrary, when we see what he does next is that he declares a war on Afghanistan, which to him seems harboring bin Laden. So the world is aware what happened next, how bad the condition of Afghanistan had been then. So we see that Bush, when he brings wrath on entire nation, he emerges particularly the bad American. For every war is a war. Although in the novel A Thousand Splendid Suns, we have Tariq's justifications, but they are not sufficient. In Hosseini's third novel, And the Mountains Echoed, we have two characters towards the second half of the novel, Idris and Taimur. These people, these are Afghan born, but in their childhood they have migrated to US. So we consider them having lived just few years in Afghanistan. They are kind of Americans. So when they return to Afghanistan, one of them turns out to be a good American and another bad one. We see that Idris and Taimur, when they visit Afghanistan in 2003 to sell off their property, in Afghanistan, Taimur can be seen publicly distributing money of that big pomp and show to street beggars, vendors. And Idris is particularly in love. And he shows affection for a girl, Afghan girl, Roshi. And he promises her that once he's back to America, he will provide her full treatment. He may call her there and give her a nice surgery. But once Idris lands in America, he has all forgotten Roshi. So he emerges as a bad American who has no, who gives a total damn about his promises, his love, his feelings, or relationship with Roshi. But we have Idris, we have Taimur, who actually pays for the surgery of Roshi. So his character appears as to be a good American. So in a way, we say that the novels of Hosseini are upholding the Western propaganda and perspective of Afghanistan. They present a deep insight into the neo-colonialism and neo-Orientalism, grasping the very essence of Afghanistan. The novels are simply outcome of the workings of neo-colonial First World. In Hosseini's novels, America is presented as a land of peace and prosperity, and Afghanistan is presented throughout as a hopeless nation. Hamid Dabashi has rightly called writers like Hosseini as comrade intellectuals, particularly in his book Brown Skin, White Mask. According to him, writers like him provide credibility to the US invasion and its policies. We also see that Laura Bush particularly has praised the novel The Kite Runner soon after its publication. So she emerges kind of a good American praising someone who has come from the third world. But we should not forget here that while she was praising the book Kite Runner, in the same time, she had failed to provide a platform for Iraqis who wanted to speak against the US invasion of Iraq. So there she emerges as a bad American as well. So next we have that if we talk about Nadeem Aslam is a Pakistani-born writer, and as per my analysis, he has a better and holistic picture of Afghanistan in his novels. Nadeem Aslam in his novels The Wasted Vigil and The Blind Man's Garden, which are set in Afghanistan, shows us the actual workings of US neo-colonial and neo-Oriental forces. A comparative analysis, kind of both Hosseini and Aslam, gives us actual representation of Afghanistan. We have a character, David Town, in the novel The Wasted Vigil, who is a former American spy. So this man here is our good American man. David in the novel can be seen financing many schools in Afghanistan, typically like Hosseini's novels, where there are outsiders who are beneficial, generous, and helpful for the people. Apart from this, not only he does this finance school building, like Taimur now Afghanistan school, one of the schools he built in the novel, he also helps Kasa. Kasa is a kind of Afghan rebel. He's a stereotype of Taliban figure, a young boy who has been kind of brainwashed. But he helps him. He helps him as he's a runaway and he takes refuge in Mark's and David's house. So he helps him. So here we have this American man having sympathy for an Afghan rebel. But to oppose to him, we have a bad American as well. That's James. James is a typical example of the bad American who justifies American torture. In the novel The Wasted Vigil, in chapter 9, we come across an episode when the American soldiers enter the house and they they take hold of Casa. Casa can be seen that the American is, I quote few lines from the text, quote, his chest pinned down by the knees of an American man, unquote. So we have then soundless screams from him. We have the torture right in front of us. The eye is gone, the eye erupting black blood, all these images. And these are the bad American soldiers who are doing it. And we have James also to add to it that despite warnings from David that he will drag him to the court, he will complain about his injustices. James can be seen reluctant. So what emerges out of the scene is a typical conversation between a good American and a bad American. So this episode triggers a conversation between the two. The good American David believes Casa and people like him can change if they're treated with humbleness, humility. They can be good, and David torture is totally illegal, and there are certain rules in war. But James opposes his thoughts. David then says to James that he is not aware of the damage he has caused by his actions. David had seen Casa changing, but James' atrocities did not let him change. Later on, we see that Casa goes for a suicide bombing attack, in which he and David both are all killed. So the conversation that follows between them is a beautiful conversation, and I'll quote, James says, these people have been trained in how to survive interrogation techniques. For some of them, true jihad starts at capture. So we have to be extreme, go beyond their trained endurance. I am just searching for our country's enemies, David. Personal against this man. To this, David gives a perfect reply, and the reply of David is kind of the best response to the war on terror subject. David says they didn't need to watch jihadi DVDs to become radicalized. They will just watch the evening news about today's episode on the TV. How things like these will be reported. So he's very true that as they are being inhuman, they are torturing him unless his eyes erupts out, and all these things will obviously radicalize such people. So David even tells James that all that they are doing is illegal. James, however, replies that, quote, this is war, David. You have been looking into the wrong law books. These are battlefield decisions, unquote. So we see that in a war state, in a country torn by war, there are no laws. There are just the whims and fantasies of the American soldiers, and everything is ruled by them. Also in Nadim Aslam's second novel, The Blind Man's Garden, we have a character, again coincidentally his name is David. He is interrogating Mikhail. Mikhail is one of the protagonists of the novel. So he says David boosts to Mikhail when Mikhail is taken to jail by them, American prison by them. David says him that we are not going to torture you. He's kind of boosting his American values. So we have this David as a good American here. He says, and I quote, the reason the United States is not torturing you, hooking you up to electricity or drilling holes in your bones, as some countries in the world do, is not that torture does not work. Torture most definitely does work, but we don't do it because we believe it's wrong and uncivilized. So how good is this American soldier in charge of the prison? And how good are his thoughts? But these thoughts are quite short-lived in the novel. In the very next page, page 187, when we just turn around, and we see that Mikhail here screams from an adjacent chamber. So there is another interrogator who establishes the fact that the next door prisoner is in a terrible agony. So it's okay, I'm sorry. So the another interrogator can be said to be a bad American.
I think it's
In fact, a very bad American.
you
Mikhail
can
says,
conclude,
and
Shafaq. I think you have a problem back end. You can wind up.
yes, ma'am, actually, this is
Yeah,
my
yeah, we understand.
just okay. To conclude, exit from the neo-Orientalist and neo-colonialist world is a must. For this, cross-cultural understanding is to be cherished and nourished. The Western treatment of Islam is a deliberate and unjust one, but nevertheless, time is ripe for interpretations of the Western ideology. Also, the creation of dilemma is to be addressed. There are numerous ways of human understanding, so no conclusions can be drawn. It's impossible to find the authenticity of fake news and real news, created wars and needed wars. It's impossible for the Western readers to understand the Eastness, and therefore they should not attempt it. The neo-colonial readers should use tools of retranslation, reinterpretation, and reanalysis cautiously. It's a true privilege of man only when he sees peace not only in his own homeland but everywhere. It's truly inhuman to make humans a mandatory instruments for fulfilling the political and economic guests of greed. At present, all the good Americans should try to end the sanctions on Afghanistan, which are put forth by the bad Americans. Even Chomsky, Tariq Ali are pleading for it. The deliberate crisis in Afghanistan must be sorted. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafaq. You very vividly brought out the comparison between the two authors, their writings, and of course the primary theme, the good American and the bad American. Quite interesting listening to you. Thank you so much, and
Yes, ma'am. Thank
please
you,
do
ma'am.
take care of your child
Yes,
back
ma'am.
home. I
Thank you,
think
ma'am.
we've trained him, her beyond. eh,
Actually, I had closed the door. She just popped in and she slipped.
That's absolutely okay. We understand.
Actually, I can hear two kids talking, ma'am.
Yes, my sister's kid also followed in and they were dragged out.
But extremely interesting paper, and you really touched upon what people are going through, especially
Yes.
in
Ma'am,
Afghanistan.
actually, I'm a research scholar and my topic is neo-colonialism and neo-Orientalism with respect to Afghanistan. And I'm
Okay.
working on these two authors
So how did you
particularly.
get
So,
interested in these two authors, Hosseini and
ma'am, actually,
Aslam?
Khalid Hosseini, he talks about pre-invasion
Yeah,
US.
he's basically from
Afghanistan, and
belongs
Nadeem
to.
Aslam talks about the post-invasion
Yeah.
time. So together they present a holistic picture.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
wonderful listening to all the speakers today. It was an excellent session, and really enjoyed myself, and of course learned so much. Every paper gives you so many insights, so many new insights, because it's impossible for us as teachers, although we've been teaching for quite a while. Even we are students, we learn every day. So wonderful listening to all of you. Thank you so much. So I'd like to
Thank you,
thank the
ma'am.
Department of English, Mohammed Sattar College once again, and of course the Cape Comorin Trust once again for giving me this chance to listen to such wonderful presentations.